Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to World Bible School Media. This is Dr. Bill, and you are watching In Search of Truth live. I want to say that this is probably my second longest running show. I'm really grateful for online broadcasting. I remember when pastors came to me during COVID and said, "What are we going to do? How are we going to function? How are we going to have church?" I said, "Hey, go online on Facebook and start teaching and get all your parishioners to follow you and just keep going." But nonetheless, we're here, and I'm very grateful. I've been broadcasting nearly 10 years, and I read somebody else's bio that had been broadcasting for that particular amount of time. But anyway, good to see my wife, Dr. Faye Hanshu, watching tonight, and others that are joining us. Many of you will join by our YouTube channel. So whether you're on Facebook or YouTube, welcome to the show. My guest tonight is Dr. Tom Wadsworth, PhD. He has been with me before. And, from the last time till now, I've missed being on camera with you. And so it's like my brother from another part of the country that I've just not got to see for a while. But anyway, after 10 years of ministry, 10 years of broadcasting, and 30 years of corporate communications, he completed his PhD and produced 7 videos on early church assemblies. Now, I cut his bio down for tonight because he's already been a guest, and I really enjoy having him. His YouTube videos are turning heads around the world, having been viewed by 900,000, I think I got that right, times in more than 110 countries. You can find out more about him and his videos on YouTube. I'm going to post the link very shortly. And so, Dr. Tom, such a privilege and honor to have you. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Dr. Bill. Again, I can update those numbers a little bit. Since we last chatted, I crossed the million mark, so we've got more than 1 million views of my
Wow.
YouTube videos now. They just continue to grow significantly. Significantly, there's a great deal of interest in the content that I'm producing right now.
Yes. And one of these days, maybe we'll talk about some questions that I have. I used to really get bummed out about that. Make sure that you're assembling yourselves together. If you don't go to church, you're not faithful to show up, then hey, something's wrong with you. There's just a lot of things in the New Testament that really are questionable when you read it verbatim from an English translation of the scriptures. But I do want to say this, that when I was a young minister, in my late teens, actually, I began preaching at 17 years old, and so the 18, 19-year mark, I often would read the Bible, and I would think about, what was going on in their minds. What were they thinking in the first century, particularly of the New Testament? I often wonder what it was like for them, especially how things were from their perspective instead of our modern day ideologies that we got. And for someone that's been in the church my entire life, all 70 years, I mean, very little, as I think kindergarten was my first memory of church. But for all of these years, there's a lot of things I've heard, a lot of things that were taught that have become questionable in my life. And so I think getting hooked up with you is just the right guy to discuss some of this stuff with. And so what we're going to do tonight is uh, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to talk about some questions. This will be kind of an interview type thing, interview interaction type thing, and I think there's some things that are discoveries, they're questions, they're discoveries about the first century realities for the church of that time that people, it's I posted a piece in the advertisement, the write up on Facebook about people. It's like National Enquiry. Inquiring minds want to know, but in the church we just become afraid to ask. We were taught never question the Bible, never question your leaders, and I'm the guy that's been preaching that all this time. That question the Bible, question your leaders. I mean, there's stuff that has a right to be questioned. So let's start with this, and if you want to respond to anything that I've said, you can can just throw that in the beginning. But you made this statement. You said that they didn't preach sermons in the New Testament church. I really found that fascinating because we really don't find a place where they actually structured and put together and then preached a sermon. What did you mean by that? What is that really saying to us?
Yeah, good question, Dr. Bill. Uh, why they didn't preach sermons in the first century church? Um, let's do it this way. Look up the word preach
Mm-hmm.
and search every time it's found in the New Testament. Look up the word sermon, and every
Mm-hmm.
time it's found in the New Testament, which is none, it's never found. It's not even found in the Sermon on the Mount. The word sermon isn't there. It may be inputted in some of the subheadings by editorial people for the Bible publisher, but it's not found in the text. But look it up and just see what you learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
And just a quick note, besides that, before I get into that,
Mm-hmm.
I think, Bill, we're going to start to see a lot of new discoveries. Uh, what has happened in the last 30 years is the digitization of data of both Bible. You can now go online and look up a Bible, and you can do what I just said. Look up
Mm-hmm.
the word preach every time it's found. And it also, there's a lot of software programs that'll let you see the Greek word behind it and
Mm-hmm.
what that Greek word means. And then look up every time that Greek word is found so that you can do this kind of study for yourself. Whereas before, you would have to have a concordance and a big old concordance and look one line by line, go down and study each one of these passages to try to get a feel for what this word means and the context in which it is used. And my point is, because of digitization and online access to vast volumes of data regarding the Bible, I think we're going to start to see more and more realizations and revelations coming. So, back on
Mm-hmm.
the issue of why they didn't preach sermons. Well, you do not see the word preach applied to what Christians did in their assemblies in the first century in the New Testament. How about that? What
Mm-hmm.
you do see, rather, is the concept of teaching, uh, exhorting,
Mm-hmm.
encouraging one another. You see this dialogic approach to the speaking. And what I mean by that is dialogue. You have two people, it's a two-way communication. Rather, preaching, as it is understood in the New Testament, is primarily monologic, one-way communication, somebody standing up on a platform and proclaiming whatever their message is to a large group of people. Now, that does take place in the New Testament. Jesus did that. Paul did that, but they did not do it inside of a Christian gathering. That kind of activity, preaching, whether it's the Greek word euangelizomai or the Greek word keruso, these words are applied to what happens to outsiders. Proclamation of the gospel to outsiders, to people who have never heard it before. But once you gain disciples, once you build an ecclesia, a church,
Mm-hmm.
then what you do with those folks is you teach and you exhort one another. A lot of dialogic activity going on and not monologic activity. So that's all too non-quick summary of what I'm saying there.
Yes, yes, and there's a lot of things, that we practice in our modern day churches, in our modern day, um, um, that we've learned from the last 400 or 500 years of our modern theologians that I often challenge because my forte is theology. I'm the head of the head of theology at World Bible School University. I may be the founder. I don't run the school. My wife is the managing director. Very educated lady when it comes to business and that sort of thing. And but I remember back in the day. I had a Bible. My grandmother gave me my first real preaching Bible, let's say, a Schofield Bible, a Great Baptist Bible. And my wife bought me this Bible dictionary that had, it was pretty thick. It had some explanations in it. But I remember the day that a young minister from one of our youth classes had given me a Strong's Concordance. Now, I'll tell you what, it's no wonder that it's called a Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. And you know the joke behind that, you're exhausted by the time you, yeah, but I never understood it. I'd never seen one before. I really didn't know how to dig into it. And the day came that my wife bought me a Hebrew Greek study Bible, the Key Hebrew Greek study Bible, and I learned a lot about the Strong's Concordance until I began to preach the King James with Strong's added into it until it didn't sound like the King James or any other version anymore. So I began to branch out from there. But that was really all of the study helps with no computers, no smartphones, no way to search the internet. But man, when we got the internet, I'll tell you what, it has enabled us to reach ministers. We have almost 600 students in our school. They're all, for the most part, ministers who are hungry to know some of the stuff they didn't learn. And so we're doing our best to share that with them. In the process, one of the things I find challenging, and I can't wait to get to evangelism, but the next question I have on my list is, did they have church services like we do here in the 21st century? And I think we touched on that last time, but that's a real interesting question. Did they really have? I mean, I know what it's like to go to church without ever thinking about that we are the church and that the building is not the church, but we think about going to church, and really it's going to an assembly where an assembly of people gather together. And we talked about last time where if it's just you and I right now here on this broadcast, we're having fellowship, we are assembling together. But did they really do the things that we do, and we get all dressed up and we sit in a pew and we listen to a sermon for an hour and organize worship and so on? What was it really like?
Yeah. What they were doing in the first century is dramatically different than what we do today. This was the focus of my doctoral dissertation in New Testament studies at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in Kansas City, which I finished 3 years ago. I focused purely on first century Christian assemblies. And the main discovery of that particular dissertation is that in the first century, they would not have described what they do in their gatherings as worship. They would not have described these gatherings as services, and they certainly would not have described them as worship services. So that's why we have such a dramatic uphill battle in trying to get our heads around what they were doing in their first century gatherings. But let me summarize this quickly. The primary purpose of everything they did in these gatherings was to build up one another.
Mm-hmm.
It was a horizontal emphasis of helping one another, teaching one another, praying for one another, comforting one another, exhorting one another, confessing your sins to one another. All these one anothering activities, which are so prominent throughout the New Testament, these tend to be forgotten and not applied. But they were, in the first century, they were applied in a gathering environment where people could look each other in the face. And when you think of a first century gathering, think in terms of a house gathering. It's widely known that in the first century, house churches were the common way that churches would gather together. So they're sitting in a living room. They're looking each other in the face. They're maybe on couches in circles or wherever they can stand or sit, and looking each other and exchanging thoughts to one another. There's not this large room with stained glass windows and a elevated platform at one end of the living room where some guy gets up there who's all dressed up in some fancy duds and looking very holy, and he's then delivering behind this pulpit some fancy oration. No, it's just us folks sitting around, and we're doing our best to build up one another. The Lord's Supper, as it was a meal. The Lord's Supper was a supper. That's why the word supper is there. It's the Greek word dapnon, which means supper. It means a meal. It was the Lord's meal. They're in a home situation where they're enjoying a meal with one another. It's that kind of environment. Think of small gatherings, one anothering, and then you're going to have a better idea of what a first century assembly was all about. Notice I called it an assembly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've learned to use that word extensively, which is, by the way, a better translation of the Greek word ekklesia, which is usually
Mm-hmm.
translated as church. But in my mind, the word church has become too churchy for us in our culture, and it did not have a churchy connotation in the first century. It's an assembly, it's a gathering. This is what Christians did when they got together.
Let me take a moment and go off script as far as what I have down for questions tonight, and just you do meetings, you do conferences, you get invited to these places, and all of a sudden it looks like the church that you've discovered that is not really the way church was conducted. How do you handle that?
Explain a little further. What do you mean?
Well, you get invited to do seminars or conferences and gatherings, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the meeting's opened with some sort of traditional form of worship and all of the things that they do, and then you're brought to the stage or to the center of the ring, as it's supposed so to speak, and it doesn't it feel like you're back in the church setting that you've discovered is not really the way churches really should function.
Now I get it. Yeah. Yes, it does. Well, in a way, I feel kind of like Paul in the first century. He was taking advantage of the common Jewish gatherings known as a synagogue
Mm-hmm.
and using that as a platform to present what he really wanted to say, regardless of whether the platform itself was appropriate or not.
Right.
Yeah, I've learned to, as Paul said in what First Corinthians 9, to become all things to all men, so that by all means I might save some. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
go with the flow. I understand that Christianity in the 21st century is accustomed to having church services, and let us open our worship service with prayer. And okay,
Right. Right.
I get it. I get it. I don't get upset. I don't vomit or anything because of all that. I just try to be when in Rome, do as the Romans do, that kind of thing, and then enter into my topic and do my best to present things biblically and clearly
Yes.
as best as I can.
Yes. And I really thought that would be sort of your answer to that. A lot of comments tonight. I want to say it's good to see Pastor Tarzi Martin. He's a friend from the Malaysia and Borneo Islands area. Good to see Apostle Daniel Williams, Angela and Josh Martell, Dr. Kay Fairchild, all of you. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. Now, having a university, and about the only thing that's traditional about me, I think, is that I wear a collar. I'm the head of a university. I'm a bishop to many churches and ministers around the world, and I kind of, go with what is expected of me. But one of the things that I really struggle with sometimes is the traditional mindset about evangelism, because we've got the idea that evangelize means to go to a church and hold a series of meetings for an extended amount of time and see how many people we can get to come to Jesus and so on. Well, this is one of the questions. Did they evangelize the world around them in the same traditional sense that most evangelicals do today?
Ah, that's a great question.
Uh,
You know, I,
I,
I first I first encountered this question when I was in seminary for the first time back in the 1970s. You and I remember the 70s, don't we, Bill?
oh, yes. Oh,
Uh,
yes.
but and I wanted to know, okay, what is evangelism? What does it mean? How did they do that? Um, and so I looked up the word evangelize, which is the Greek word euangelizomai, and tried to figure out how that is done and what it involves. And now the real question I was asking is, what is the obligation on the part of the average Christian to this task of evangelism? Now, you know as well as I do that it was very, very common, and it still is very, very common for everybody to be impressed with the Great Commission. We
Mm-hmm.
are all
Mm-hmm.
called on
Mm-hmm.
the Great Commission to go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that hit me about that verse was Jesus indeed made that statement.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't make it to everybody. He spoke it to the 12 disciples, 12 apostles that he had personally handpicked, had personally trained for 3 years, and even had sent them out on a trial mission there in Luke 10. And he also then comes to this point at the end of Jesus' teaching ministry of 3 years, and then he commissions these 12. Now, we made this big jump, a hermeneutical jump, when we say, okay, that applies to everybody. Well, let's suppose it does apply to everybody, then you'd think that these 12 apostles, Peter, James, and John, and everybody, would then start to teach that everybody is supposed to preach the gospel and go into all the world,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't. Read all of the epistles. Read
Mm-hmm.
all of the epistles of Paul and Peter and James and John and Jude. Look at them all. Look at them all. And see where they emphasize that fact. They don't. Rather, what you do see is like Colossians 4, verses, what is it? Verses 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, where Paul really gives there in this nice little package a better description of how evangelism takes place. He says, I want you, Christians at Colossae, to pray for us, the evangelists, uh, Paul and Timothy, whoever he's going with at that time in his evangelistic missions. Pray for us that the Lord may open a door for the word to us. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
pray for that. That's the job of the Christians. Pray that these guys who have this special task, that has all these special skills, to go out there and have the door open for the word there. But you guys make the most of the time as you speak to others, as you answer their questions. In verses 5 and 6 is where he goes into making the most of the time and giving a response to people that helps them understand where we're coming from. In other words, the attitude of the evangelist is more offense, delivering this monologic proclamation to outsiders, but the attitude of the insiders, of average Christian, is more of a defensive one. You're responding to questions that outsiders have to us about what we're all about. And yes, Christians need to be prepared to give a reason for the hope that is within you.
Yes.
1 Peter 3:15. Absolutely, we do. But we need to understand that evangelism is a highly complex task that is very difficult, requires a special set of skills and motivation that does not apply to everyone. It actually applies to a very small percentage of Christians in the body. Remember 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul said, there are different members of the body with different skills, the foot cannot say to the hand, because you're not a foot, you don't count. We're pretending as if everybody has to be the mouth and to
Mm-hmm.
be the evangelist. Well, that's just not the case. God has so ordered the body of Christ so that people have different tasks, different talents, different gifts that they have to offer in behalf of Jesus for the church at large. So that's a summary of how I've come to view the evangelistic task in the first century.
Yes, yes. And unfortunately, we've not understood the first century. And so by the time we get to the 21st century, we've reinvented all of that. And now we have evangelists who are not wearing sheep's clothing, they're wearing the clothing of missionaries, and they're going all over the world. I mean, we know this firsthand because the predominant group of our university, our student body is Africans, and we see this happening in Pakistan and India and Africa and both North and South, and just everybody's got to be an evangelist. Everybody's got to travel. And really, I find it refreshing that I can travel, but I don't have to travel. I find I'm not mandated by God to travel anywhere. And I mean, do I have a lot of things to share? Absolutely. And guess what? Right here in my home office and my studio and broadcasting to the world, I think we've probably reached every nation in the world at some point or another. What a blessing. um, and let me just add this, that when it comes to the Great Commission, one thing I tell our students is that the words Great Commission, we call it that. We actually think that's a mandate from God, but actually the Great Commission was added by the publishers, those that put these headings in there, and it wasn't really in the sentence and structure of the Bible. But to go train others or go disciple others, those were words that I find more appropriate in that setting. So. I'm so glad we're talking about this. Here's one for you. Were the preachers of the first century? Now, I've got among my a few doctorates that I have, but one of them says um, seminary and Bible seminary as the tag on it, without giving the whole name of the university. And you're seminary trained, and were the preachers of the first century seminary trained in the proper methods of sermon preparation and how to deliver their message?
It's almost funny to even express that because, but I'm so glad you asked that. The answer is no.
Hmm.
This is, I think Timothy becomes a a prototype of how training would have taken place. He accompanied Paul.
Hmm.
It's learning on the job, hands-on experience. There's nothing quite like it. They didn't send him off somewhere to be trained. That would have been Timothy's experience. But there's also training that's taking place inside each individual assembly. Uh,
Yes.
Paul says to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2 to train. Well, it's leaving my mind a bit. You can pick up for me there, Bill. To teach, uh, to find others who'll be able to teach others, and then
Hmm.
you're training people to be teachers.
Hmm.
Hebrews 5:12, the writer says, by this time, you guys ought to be teachers. There was an expectation that in a gathering, a Christian assembly,
Hmm.
church, that whatever they're doing on a weekly basis is able to be developing the skills of the people therein so that some of them, anyway, would be able to then become a teacher, would know enough and would have skills enough to be able to present this stuff clearly and effectively to any given audience. So this is somehow the church as seminary got replaced. We've kicked out the church. You can't do it anymore. And you have to send people off to some special place we call the seminary and do the training there. Now, I frankly love seminaries. I would
Yes.
spend the rest of my life sitting in there and learning. This is great stuff. I love the people there. I love the training going on. But we need to ask ourselves, what are we missing by the way we're doing it? And why can't churches themselves start to develop people into being better Christians, just better Christians alone, but then
Yes.
even better teachers, better capable as deliverers of a message, whether it's an exhortation type message to fellow Christians or an evangelistic message to outsiders. We're just failing miserably at that task.
Yeah. Yeah. I I agree. One of the things that I often think about is exactly what you brought up tonight, how that Paul taught Timothy, his son in the faith. I never advertise and say, "Hey, I'm a spiritual father of X amount of years." Um, how many of you like to be sons in the faith? But I always get hit up about, can I be a son in the faith? Can I tag along in your teachings? And of course I don't pastor a brick and mortar building anymore, and don't even have a online church of any sort. But one of the things we do, and my wife mentioned this in a comment, and I want to say real quickly, my friend Apostle Daniel, who is a advisor for our World Bible School Fellowship group. He has a home church. I mentioned Pastor Tarzi Martin in the Borneo Islands in Malaysia. He has two different home churches. I know Dr. Kay Fairchild has a brick and mortar church, and also has a church by the internet from her home on a different night. Dr. Roy Richmond, who received a doctorate in our school in biblical studies, I believe it was, he has a home church every Sunday morning, and it's just a home group, a small group, and they're reaching the world by the internet. But my wife mentioned one of the things we do in our school is we offer ministry life credits, which is ministry life credits is that you, based on how many years you've been in the ministry and you've learned from that, we can offer a certain amount of credits up to a maximum amount that the law says is okay. And she says she thinks that training, person to person, or the things they've learned working with other people, is some of the best training that's available out there prior to our university training. Um, and so that's a lot of the things that I learned was with people, having spiritual fathers, having mentors. And is it important to have a degree hanging on the wall? I like the idea. I think it's good to be professionally trained. It's just that I was asked this question. I was asked by a head of a university somewhere else, why do we need to tell students to come to your school? And I said this. I said, I've been to several universities, and I got tired of going from one to the next and learning the same things over and over again. There had to be something fresh, had to be something new, and God began to teach me something. And for me, the real transformation came when the Lord asked me to teach the book of Revelation verse by verse in a home Bible study. And in verse 1, I discovered some things that blew me away. And it didn't take very long until I said to the Lord, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. It doesn't match any of my eschatology books. It doesn't match my Bible prophecy books. It doesn't match anything I've been taught. And yet I found that it was real information, real revelation. And so I tell you what, I've had students disagree with my teachings on the book of Revelation. It's just because, and I always end every class by saying this, Dr. Tom, what I've taught you in this class today may be different than you've heard ever before, but it doesn't make it false or fake. It just means you've never heard it that way before.
Yeah.
And that's so much of the stuff. It's like back in the first century, and I know this question is on the my list of questions. What was it like back then that is different? I know this can be a generalized thing and it can go any direction, but what was it like back then that's so different than how it is in our modern world today? What was it like?
Well, let's talk about that issue of teaching and training. What was different? I think uh, Jesus and his teaching method of the 12, the
Mm-hmm.
rabbi who has these followers, these disciples who follow him around and listen to him talk. And then they have exchanges, question and answer periods where they learn from one another. They watch and follow. This was not new with Jesus. Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. This was their pattern of teaching as well. There are other teachers well known throughout the Middle East of that particular era of time when this was the way people learned. You attach yourself to somebody who is known and respected as a teacher, and you follow.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk alongside, and you listen, and you learn. You ask questions. There's exchange. It's not just sitting in a lecture room and getting yelled at for 50 minutes. That's something okay. And then take a test on it later. Okay, well, maybe I can ace the test. But really, did you learn anything? I think we learn when we're able to talk back. and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
have the teacher say, Tom, uh, that's a good thought, but it needs to be corrected a bit. Here's how I would tweak that. And so, but it's in that give and take process, this correction process, the rebuking process. These are all biblical words that apply to Christian assemblies. It's in that kind of environment where we then learn, all of us, not just the ones who are
Mm-hmm.
training to become a pastor, but everybody should be in training to be better as a
Mm-hmm.
Christian, and to be growing in the graces that God has given us.
Yes. And that's one of the things that we find very compelling with my wife and I, and that is, and we've taught in other universities and been a part of other countries and their universities. But one of the things we've done in ours is we offer a degree in Christian counseling now, a doctorate in Christian counseling. Now, here's the thing: a lot of people believe that if I get this degree in Christian counseling, or this doctorate rather, then I should be able to go out into the world and acquire a secular job in counseling. Our degrees are not for that. We're trying to take pastors who have had struggles and really issues, complications in counseling or mentoring other people. We want to help pastors become better counselors, a better communicator with the people who come in and say, "Hey, I've got this problem. I think it might be emotional. I think it might be psychological. How do I evaluate that?" And so we deal in that. And that brings me to the next question. It doesn't seem like a good segue, but training in homiletics. It's common in seminaries. We do that too. It's common in seminaries and Bible colleges. How would you suggest that we revise this training? We're listening.
I think there's a problem there. And I've been trained in homiletics. And yes, just like you, Bill, I've had pulpit work where I was paid to deliver a homily or a sermon of something
Uh huh.
every
Uh huh.
week, so you got to get good at it. But there's something wrong with the perception of the minister as an orator. Uh, and the thing that's wrong with it is that we are taking away from the people their opportunity to engage themselves in the topic, to talk back, to ask questions, to present their own perspective, to learn from that give and take, one anothering kind of process, so that everybody can just sit back and relax, sit in your pew, give your kids their little box of Cheerios and their coloring book, and relax and just bring it on, Pastor. And then when you go out the door at the end, you can shake his hand and say, Pastor, great sermon today. I don't remember what it was, but boy, it was great. And by the time they get to their car, they haven't really remembered anything. But if you're in a smaller group, and I think you really need to drill things into small groups where you do have the opportunity and the freedom to ask questions and to present your own perspective. I've had several, I know I'm sure you have as well, where you've preached a sermon, you did your homiletics, uh, but somebody told you later, says, I disagree with what you said,
Mm-hmm.
but they really didn't have the opportunity to explain it. And for both of you to sit down face to face, Christian to Christian, with a loving attitude to one another to try to come to an understanding of what your perspective is on that. I hated the impression that I've always got to defend what I just said, that somehow every word that pops out of my mouth is correct and perfect and
Mm-hmm.
should
Mm-hmm.
never be questioned. Uh, Something's wrong with that attitude. I can be coming at an issue from the wrong angle
Mm-hmm.
and not realize it. And I need one of the people listening to me to say, wait a minute, Tom, hold it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think you're thinking about this angle of that particular problem you're addressing, because if you look at it from that angle, you're totally wrong. And they're probably right. I am not right all the time. I do need correction. We need one another. That's why God
Yeah.
has so designed the body of Christ so that there are several members, and there's not just one member that's got a mouth and everybody sits back and listens. There are several members with several functions, and they all need to work together. And the function of the apostles, prophets, pastors, and teachers and evangelists is to equip the saints for the work of ministry. I know you
Mm-hmm.
preached that before, Ephesians 4.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to be equipping people to be doing works of service to others, and so that they are being trained and they're developing as well. But I fear that our homiletic approach is not um, equipping the saints for the work of ministry. We're just yelling at them for 40 minutes every week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more about a train and release program. It's more about an equipping, help them get to the place that they need to be or they desire to be in sharing the gospel in whatever venue that might be. Um, yeah, so I will say this. You're right about we don't like to be questioned. It doesn't go well. It doesn't set well with the ego part of of our makeup. But and you know what's hard to question is when you have a strictly online university. How do students question the professor? Because being the founder, again, I don't run the school. I'm not the director, but being the founder, I get a lot of students that contact me and say, "Hey, Professor so and so taught this, and I know you don't agree with that." And I say, "Look, you have the right to question your professor. Question them. You have a place in the program that we use to go into the inbox and ask them a question because I get it all of the time. I enjoy being challenged because here's where I am when I make these crazy statements, these off the wall, off the chart from the English Bible statements. I also back it up by validating that as a truth. I want to show them how I came to that conclusion. And so if you're still not getting it or I'm presenting it wrong, then I want to know so I can improve. And my greatest joy would be this, Dr. Tom, it would be that these students take what they're being taught and develop that and come back and become my teacher.
Yeah.
I would enjoy that so much. So here's a quick thought, and I know pastors are watching right now, and it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this information? Well, here's an even another layer to this thing. If we stop preaching sermons in churches today, wouldn't people stop coming to our churches?
Well, yeah, a lot of them would. I fear that they would because it's so easy just to go someplace to sit there and do nothing and listen to whatever it is and then judge whether that guy's a good preacher or not. I don't think he's good
Mm-hmm.
enough for me. I'm going to go down the street to somebody else. And we've created this consumer culture. We did this to ourselves, and to change to a different format is not going to be easy, nor is it going to be done overnight. But I would beg anybody who's in the role of a pastor now to number one, start to create smaller groups, break big groups into small groups. Let's say your church is 250 people on a Sunday. Okay, fine. Go ahead and do what you're paid to do, which you are paid to present this sermon. I get it. It's part of the obligation, so you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then start to create these small groups, whether it's on a Sunday night or Thursday night or whenever it is, where people then have the chance to engage with one another and to engage with the topic. Maybe it's the topic of your sermon or whatever the topic is, so that they have a chance to grow and ask questions and develop their own skills as people who are verbally engaging with their Christian faith in a way. Let's get that done. One way I've suggested, if somebody really wanted to be daring, and let's say you've got a church of 250 people on a Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
um, try this. And nobody's going to do this, but let me say it anyway. Spend the first 15 minutes, maybe start off with a song, and then do a 10-minute sermon where you engage in your great homiletic skill. 10 minutes. And then ask everybody to break into groups right there, maybe in the same room, and go off. Okay, everybody whose last name begins with A through G, sit over here
Yeah.
in this and then H through M, and then N through Z, set over there. And then I want you to talk about it. And here's three good discussion questions, and maybe have discussion leaders in each one of these groups so that people can start to really consume what you've said in your 10-minute sermon and then regurgitate it and even question it and ask questions about it, so that everybody starts to really grow from the process. I don't think people are going to grow if they just sit there in this comfortable setting or sing at me and now preach at me and then let me out of here. I don't think we're growing people, but we've created this mindset, and it is self-defeating.
My wife and I led worship for many years, and as my the not the revelation of my message advanced, or changed, I began to find a lot of songs that I didn't want to sing anymore. I think there needs to be a change in our worship. I know some churches and pastors watching that, they've upscaled the worship, something to cause people to want to interact with each other, especially interact with Jesus. And but I wanted to get to this is my last question. I kind of want to set this up. In the first century, the world's population was estimated to be around 150 to 330 million, more or less. Today, the population of the world, everybody knows this, is over 8 billion people. Well, having said that, I think sometimes that I think about what it was that helped shape the worldview of the first century. I mean, think about this: they lived under Roman rule. It's no secret that Rome itself wanted to rule the world. They wanted to take over everything. I remember the collaborations between Jewish leaders and Rome, trying to create this one world church. See, people think that's a big threat today. That's not a big threat. That was going on in biblical times. But they were under this constant threat of persecution, and sometimes even their lives were laid on the line. They simply did things differently, and I think the only way to find that out is to look at history and look at the places in the Bibles, that the places that our Bibles do not take us. There's research available out there, folks, and I'd love to share about that sometime. But you recently, Dr. Tom, you recently launched a video that suggested, and could be a video series, that suggested that elders, pastors, and bishops were basically of the same function in the first century. If I might just say, would you explain that for us? But also, how does that really, how did it work then? How does it work today? If you want to just take the rest of the time and just kind of lay that out.
Yeah, there's two verses that are very helpful in putting all this together. One is Acts chapter 20, verse 28 to 32, right in there. Here, Paul calls the Ephesian elders,
Mm-hmm.
presbyteroi, the presbyters, the elders at Ephesus, to come meet with him. And in meeting with them, he says to them, the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, episkopos, which is the word for bishop. And he says to shepherd the church of God. And the word for shepherd is the word for pastor, poimen. They just mean the same thing. And so this was extremely common, and it fits with everything else in the New Testament that talks about these church leaders. They're primarily called elders, because they were usually older men. They were, but they were called to be overseers and to be shepherding of the people in the flock. And one of the key parts of their function was teaching. So that all this is going together with them. Then there's another verse in 1 Peter 5, verses 1 to 4, where Peter himself says, I exhort you elders, as a fellow elder myself, to shepherd the church of God, overseeing them. Here he uses the same terms again. He's using elder with the word for overseer, episkopos, with the word for shepherding, poimen, all in the same verse, to refer to the same function by the same people. We in our modern context, we think bishops are up above everybody else, and underneath them is this, and then underneath that is that, and we've got this hierarchical system. It fits very well with our American mindset of hierarchy and CEOs and such, which is fine. But the first century situation was substantially different. And the name of that video that you referred to is called Elders of the Ecclesia, where I shared this information, several passages as well. I forget how long, maybe it's a 50-minute video on my YouTube channel. And what was I was amazed about, Dr. Bill, was that how quickly this thing took off. And this was just launched, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe less than 2 weeks ago, and it already has more than 25,000 views.
Excellent.
Looking at the views numbers, that's astonishing, and it's way
Mm-hmm.
above average for my own videos as well. People are interested in this. The issue of leadership and how leaders function is a burning issue for us today, and it should be. And let me add one more thing about this. Jesus talked about leadership when there seemed to be a fight among the 12 as to who's going to be on the right hand and the left hand and who's going to be prominent. And he says, listen, guys, uh, forget about this prominence business. The one who would be first among you must be last. He who would be the leader must be the servant of all. Uh, we got to be thinking in terms of servant
Mm-hmm.
leadership. I mean, really being a servant and seeing ourselves as not as important as others being more important than we are. Philippians 2:2, isn't it? This is part of Christian leadership, the way Jesus taught it, to wash the feet of the disciples. That's what leaders do. And yet, very quickly in church history, as I explain in this video, that whole thing got warped, even by the second century.
Mm-hmm.
The ego, the arrogance, and the power play started to come into play, so that you started having people over other people, and it all got twisted and warped. And we today are the inheritors of years and years and years of traditionally looking at it that way.
Yes. Yes. I remember um, back when churches among leadership had this organizational chart, and it was the pastor at the top, and then there was the elders, and then there was deacons, and they had this whole big pyramid-looking thing. Then there came the day where they turned that upside down, and it was really a false humility thing in my perspective, the pastor at the bottom, and worked its way back. My wife and I came up with the idea of one single line, and everybody was on the same line. Now, given that some have more responsibility than others, because sometimes some just take more responsibility or are willing to handle more responsibility. But it's the way you view people, and we did this probably 25 years into ministry, and we was very very denominationally trained, very I mean, it was like, stay with your own group, don't venture out and visit with others, and just very different. But we just believed that everybody was on the same line, and that we ought to treat everybody as our equals. And I think that's the way Jesus did. One of the things I discovered when Jesus sent his disciples out to minister, he in the Greek, for me, what I discovered is he called them apostle trainees, but he treated them as no less than the other, and he went to just be a support to them, not to take over, not to run what they were doing, and very interactive. And that's the thing that we learned early on. I think that's really been a strength in our own university. Is it's really, we're here to serve. How can we serve you? What can we do for you? How can we explain this? How can we make it more comfortable for you to be a part of this thing that's happening worldwide? And so, yeah, I love that. And I love these questions, and I know that we're going to bring you back on again at some point and talk about some different things, some more things, and but I just think that what you're doing, and I posted Dr. Tom's YouTube channel again when I first started the broadcast, and even now, so that you can go there. I would encourage you to subscribe. I would encourage you to watch his videos on the ecclesia, what worship was like in the first century, so many different things. I've watched several of them, and sometimes I can only watch a half at a time or something, but do what fits your schedule. But go there, please. I encourage you to go there and watch. One of the things I love is an opposing perspective. You and I have not found ourselves to be on opposite ends of the fence. Pretty much we meet in the middle about all of this. And now I'm not so sure if everybody heard my Revelation teaching that we can find a place to meet in the middle. But the truth is, I really enjoy what you have to say. I love the journey. When I read the full bio that you have, I love your journey. I love how you've come from where you were. It kind of reminds me of, even though we come from different ends of the spectrum with Church of Christ and Pentecostal Church of God, and it's amazing how God brings us to a place that it's kind of like meet in the middle. It's like the past really wasn't that big of a deal. It was important. It got me to where I am now. But here I am. We're of the same mind about. Someone asked me, what do you hope to do with this online thing you're doing? I said, just reach the whole world. That's all. Just want to reach the whole world, and hopefully my message is right. Hopefully, if it's not, then we'll work on it and get more of it tomorrow. But Dr. Tom, this is an amazing line of thought. Even though we've had a variety of questions here, it really was different in the first century, and it would behoove us to pay attention to more than what our modern theological perspectives have taught us, and realize they did something in the first century that we could actually, it's the mindset that they had that we could bring into this modern time. That'd really be beneficial to other people.
I'm with you 100%, Bill, and I really appreciate your openness and your willingness to listen to other ideas. I tell you, I get opposed by lots of folks who hear my stuff and they think it sounds crazy, and they come after me. But it's so nice to run into somebody who's just willing to listen. And I think all your people who are watching right now know that this about you, that Dr. Bill is somebody who's willing to listen and look at the scriptures from a fresh perspective and see where we can go with it. So God bless you and your ministry.
Well, listen, how do you know if what you believe is really right, or it's not challengeable, or you've really got it settled in your own heart? If somebody doesn't come along and say, hey, I'm not so sure about that, can you really explain that further? How did you come to this conclusion? That's the place I live. I love that. So yeah. And you know, I have my limits on the content for the show, but you know, you have you're certainly a brother that shares a vision and a goal to minister something fresh, and something that, and Dr. K. Fairchild says this: it's not new age, it's now age. It's not a new word we're hearing. It's just the revelation of the mind of God that's always been. And so go to YouTube, click on the link there on the page on our video right here. Go to YouTube and find Dr. Tom Wadsworth and hear what he's got to say. It'll bless you. Amen. Well, thank you, sir, for being on again. We'll get something else rescheduled as soon as we can. But you're a blessing.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bill. Enjoy it, and look forward to our next time as well.
Amen. Well, hey, everybody, have a great evening. Have a great morning, depending on where you're at in the world. And join me tomorrow night. I'm teaching solo tomorrow night. I don't remember what I'm even teaching on. My guest canceled last minute, and I always take that as a personal challenge. I'm talking about eternal truth eschatology. I found the traditional view of eschatology. I found the modern view of eschatology, but I also found that God had something else in mind, and that's an eternal truth eschatology. And I've been teaching on that. I'm doing a class right now on eschatology defined, and I think you will enjoy it. And even if you don't enjoy it, I think you'll be challenged by it. So join me tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Friday morning, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. Dr. Catherine Toon will be back so we can finish up a series we're having so much fun with. So good night, everyone. We'll see you real soon. Blessings to everybody.